All right. All right, let's see here. Find that link. Gonna get started in just a minute. Alright, welcome to everyone who's here. I'm actually going to give it just a couple of minutes. Before I get started, just so that people have a chance to hop on. This is going to be my first time, so definitely let me know if there's any technical issues. I only figured out how to do streaming on Switch like this morning before work. And let me go ahead and post a few more links. Got some slides up here I'm going to be going through, but you won't be able to click on the links in them, I don't think, unless Twitch is significantly crazier than I expect. So here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively share some of the links that we got that will be in the slides. I will also share the slides when all of this is done, so you'll be able to click the links directly, but you know, I'll be linking to a couple of things here and there, as well as listing email addresses and such. So alright. One thing I probably should have done on Twitch when I was learning this morning is figure out how to see who's actually watching, or just to make sure that people are watching. Can someone post something in Fireside chat if you're watching? Apologies. Please bear with me, since this is my first time doing this. Let's see here. Oh, I have 9 viewers. Hello! 9 people. Excellent. Whoa, I'm looking at the Twitch stream. Is everything like blue shifted? Did all the reds become blues? Is that a thing? Alright, well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. We have like actual serious stuff to go over, but, you know. It's pretty weird. Alright, excellent. People are telling me that they're seeing and hearing me. Someone's pointed out that I did set chat in Twitch to emote only, basically because we already have the Fireside chat channel in Slack, and I feel like I am almost certainly going to miss things if people are having chats in 2 different places. So yeah, I mean, assuming that it's okay with everyone, then I'll go ahead and just keep the actual chatting here in Fireside chat, and then if you want to, I'll try to monitor that. Mostly please use the Fireside chat question submission form, which is the main thing I'm going to be looking at. Ideally, if I were like a super cool Twitch streamer, I would have like 3 monitors. I am doing this from my laptop, so I can't just very conveniently throw up like the question responses here, and then the chat over here, and then the video over here, and the PowerPoint presentation over here. So yeah, excuses. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is my first time doing or even participating in any way in a Fireside chat, so my understanding of the format is that we will basically, I'm going to present for a while. I've actually got some slides here, and you guys can hear what I'm saying. And then I'll be checking Slack periodically, as well as checking the sort of submission form of just like questions you want to address. I've got a couple places in the presentation where I'm explicitly stopping for questions. So if it takes like a couple of minutes for me to to get to what you're saying, particularly if I'm in the middle of a slide or something, then don't worry. I promise I'm not ignoring you. So then, I'll be presenting for a while. I'll go over my agenda in a sec, and then afterwards I'll drop a link to a Google Meet where we can all just get in a thing and then have a much more interactive experience back and forth. And I know we've got at least several other BoD members around who can probably be a little bit more active in Slack than I am while all of this is going on, and also we'll be there for the Google Meet, so we should be able to kind of talk through all of this stuff. So this is going to be the first of what we've decided to do quarterly fireside chats, like from the BoD. This is to supplement the fireside chats that are done monthly by the executive director, Nick. Just because there are some things that are sort of BoD level things that we want to be able to present. I mean, I'll go over some of those here, and I want to make sure that this isn't just all about like status updates for some of the stuff that's happened recently. I do want to go a little bit into just more general organizational news. I think that won't really be the focus of this particular meeting, but in the future, as we continue to do more and more of these, like at least several of them a year, then this will be a good place to find out what the different like BoD meetings are happening, and what the subcommittees are doing, and like what's on the agendas, and places where like we want to see feedback from people. So I'll go over a little bit of that at the beginning, and then I'll talk about how you get in touch with the various different like committees and task forces, and how all of that works. Some of the people here will probably already know this stuff. Some people probably won't. Then I'll get into some actual review, like some of the meat of like why we're having this meeting tonight instead of say like sometime at or after Spring MagCon. Reviewing some of the recent letters that were sent in last month by former employees and others. What our general response to that is. Reviewing some of what we said at the March 23rd meeting, and then actually being able to go into like a little bit more detail after talking with our third-party HR specialist about the kinds of things that it is and isn't sort of appropriate to go into. And as part of that, we definitely want to address some specific points that were sent in, sort of in those letters, and that were set on Slack. There are definitely some very particular things that we want to underscore and communicate to everyone. And then this is not the last time we're going to have one of these meetings. This is a status update. There's an ongoing process that is not yet complete, which I'll get into when we get to that part of the presentation. But we will sort of review that and then talk about what the next steps are, talk about what the next meetings are going to be, when they're going to happen, and hopefully we will see and talk to you guys more in the coming weeks at Spring MagCon, which thankfully is on May the 4th this year. It's May the 4th be with you, Star Wars Day. So definitely looking forward to that. I don't think I have any Star Wars costumes, but I'll try to bring some lightsabers. Because Spring MagCon is coming up, I don't want to spend a lot of time going into organizational high-level things. That's something that I linked to a presentation that Dom put together. I'm sure that we will be giving a much more in-depth version of this that talks about the internal structure of the MAGFest office, the way that different MAGFest employees and volunteers interact, who reports to who, what is the system of event leaders and division heads and department heads, and how all of that happens. Again, I don't want to necessarily go over that, especially while my dog is attacking a water bottle, but what I do want to go over is like a really big change that has happened in the last year, and we've tried to be very vocal about this, but this is something that started more than a year ago, but 12 months ago there were 6 people operating at the board of directors level. which is to say the 6 members of the board of directors. And boy, that is not a lot of people, particularly with a board of directors that, strives to be like much more active and involved with the volunteer community than most boards of directors would be. And so today, by creating a bunch of basically BoD subcommittees, that number is up from 6 to 16. And it is continuing to grow. I mean, we are actively recruiting for some of these things. And so we've created an advisory task force, which has been meeting recently about things like the upcoming election and the staff satisfaction survey. Please fill that out, by the way. The staff satisfaction survey has way fewer answers and responses than it did last year. And I mean, we're not totally sure why, but we definitely want to be signal boosting that wherever possible. And we get really good recommendations that we do take action on every year. Last year I did a 15-page write-up and presented it at Spring MagCon, and we want to try and do something similar this year. The finance task force, which has just recently reviewed and sort of recommended for approval the fiscal year 2019 budget. And again, I mean, this is a really important group. It's most people are probably not going to be super into like process and spreadsheets like some of us are, but again, if you care about, hey, what does it mean for a smaller event like MAGWest to succeed, then, and like what are the kind of terms for that, then that's what that group is doing. And then the Futures Task Force, like more directly, is pursuing opportunities for growth. It is in a very real way, driving the future of MAGFest by looking into like partnerships that we can do, other groups that we want to that we want to join together with. We sometimes only half-jokingly describe ourselves not as like a video game event company, but as a sort of community building community that only incidentally involves video games, and that really is what the Futures Task Force is all about. So let's say that you want to get in touch with any of these groups. Well, I mean, we're all on Slack, we all have email lists, but actually, like, regardless, if you have a question, comment, concern, query, quandary, or conundrum about really anything, then my advice is don't sweat it too much about like which group you get in touch with, because when we're talking about people at the BoD level, even if we're not the ones who are directly handling this stuff, we know where to send it to. And in fact, explicitly, the advisory task force, which is #advisory on Slack and BoD advisory at magfest.org, one of the things that they are really chartered to do is sort of be like dispatch for everyone. It's to say, oh, you have a question about zombie LARP. It's like, okay, well, I know which division that's part of, and so I can direct that to the right place and make sure that it gets followed up on. Even if the advisory folks aren't the ones necessarily handling it, but really you can get in touch with any of these groups about anything. And of course, more recently, we actually created a board of directors Slack channel, which at the most recent advisory task force meeting a month or two ago. I think it was back in January, February, I mean, we realized that we didn't have a public board of directors Slack channel. We had @BoD in Slack, and we have for years, but it was a little embarrassing to realize that, like, oh yeah, we don't have an actual Slack channel for that. So that's been created more recently. Everyone's welcome to come in there. That is a public Slack channel, and we'll be happy to talk to anyone. And again, more recently, obviously, there have been some fairly serious complaints that have been made about the MAGFest office specifically. And so, at the advice of our external HR specialist, we created a form that basically, just a Google form where you can either be anonymous or you can actually attach your contact information so that you can, we can follow up with you. And then that form goes specifically to the volunteer members of the BoD, which is to say all the BoD members who are not being paid by MAGFest. Currently, that is everyone except Nick. At various other times, there have been differing numbers of people who are being paid by the BoD, so that membership might change over time. It also goes to Tracy, our external HR specialist, and Bunny, who many of you know as the head of consoles, but who is also MAGFest's general counsel. The recipients of that form are also the people who are on the BoD volunteers at magfest.org mailing list, which is a new mailing list that we created, again, on advice of HR, specifically for things like this. So, if for some reason you have something that, that you feel is really most appropriate to only be sharing with the sort of like volunteer BoD members and not office BoD members, and this would be the channel you would go through. But otherwise, in general, I would expect that 99% of the time, just hit us up on Slack or just email bod@magfest.org. And so more of this is going to be presented at Spring MagCon, but last year in 2018, we started talking about the fact that, hey, every few years we really have found the need to sort of radically change the structure of the office and of figuring, and the organization generally, and figuring out how to distribute like load and responsibility more evenly. And right now we have an executive director who is at the top of the organization, who has more than 20 people reporting directly to him, because he is the executive director of MAGFest Incorporated. He is the person who runs the MAGFest office that all of the employees directly report to. He is the person on the org chart who every single event leader for every single event reports directly to. He is also the event chair of Super MAGFest, which means that every division head reports directly to him, and he's also the head of the operations division, which means that there are a number of department heads reporting directly to him. Boy, that is not sustainable. That is not how we should really be, doing anything. We've spent the last several months talking about, on the board of directors and within the MAGFest office internally, talking about like how we split that out a little bit better. And this is still not complete. You can expect to hear more about this at Spring MagCon, and and beyond that, as things develop and we actually have more kind of solid, concrete information to share. But it does look like the office is going to be sort of partitioned a little bit, so that we sort of have an area of event responsibilities, which will probably involve some sort of events director that reports to the executive director, and then an administrative director hat that someone will wear that manages the MAGFest Incorporated sort of office concerns. Again, this is the kind of thing that we definitely want to be talking about in these BoD fireside chats. But I would also expect that even in just like the normal monthly fireside chats, you can kind of get filled in on this stuff. And like I said, at Spring MagCon, there'll be a lot more details I think presented about all of this, and you can definitely hit us up for any stuff. So before I go any further and really, start getting into the meat of this stuff, let me just go ahead and check and see if there's any questions. It doesn't look like anybody has submitted anything on the form just yet, but definitely, drop something in the Fireside Chat channel on Slack if there's anything where you want me to go into more detail. Ooh, looks like the org chart needs updating. Thank you, Joel. I am going to let the people who are not currently giving this presentation, go and handle like updating other documents in the middle. But all right, awesome. So far, so good. Oh yeah, and like Adam says, definitely let people know that this meeting is happening. This will be posted, by the way, just like on Twitch. I've confirmed that like old videos that get displayed are viewable, and this is also being saved to my hard drive, so if anything happens there, then anyone who missed this will be able to watch it later. But obviously there's there's no substitute for being there live and being able to actually ask questions, and hopefully we can have a nice Google Meet at the end of all of this. So all right, well, let me go back into my presentation then. All right, so this is why I think, like Dom said, the number of people we have attending this 37 is much higher than normal for a fireside chat, and and I think we all know why. And it's because last month there were several letters that were sent in to a lot of the volunteers, shared on Slack and on a number of mailing lists, raising complaints about the MAGFest office culture in general and the MAGFest Executive Director, Nick, in particular. So, like, within a few days of that happening, the board of directors had, sort of like convened an ad hoc meeting and and talked and discussed this matter with our HR person, and sort of started an HR process around all of this, which I described in our in the volunteer sort of meeting that had about 40 or 50 people in it that Josiah put together a few days later on March 23rd. That process is still ongoing, and I'm going to go ahead and review what that process is here. So one of the things that we did was we created this form that had not previously existed for people to sort of share either anonymous or non-anonymous feedback like with the volunteer members of the BoD, as well as with our general counsel and HR specialist. And that form is not specific to this situation, but it was obviously created very much with this situation in mind. And so to that end, one of the members of the BoD actually reached out to all of the people who had, who had previously worked for MAGFest, who had sent in these letters, to basically say, hey, just so you know, this form exists, and because a lot of those letters sort of contained descriptions of of how they felt the MAGFest office was, but without doing any sort of Julian Assange style giant, like, which would have been highly inappropriate Julian Assange style email dump, then that meant that, like, from our perspective as the BoD, there wasn't a lot for us to go on. And so what that means is that it was necessary and appropriate for us to sort of reach out to them and say, hey, if you want to sort of go into more detail in sort of a more private way, then this is the mechanism by which you can do that. And again, this is an ongoing thing that still exists. We're going to keep this open just forever. This is just going to become a usual thing. And at our quarterly fireside chats, you can expect us to sort of give status updates on things that are submitted through that form more generally. I dropped a link to it sort of at the beginning of all of this. And so in addition to all of that, a few of those former employees have in fact reached out either through that form or in other ways. But in speaking with Tracy, our external HR specialist, she said, and we agreed that it would be appropriate for her to also reach out to any employee that that has not sort of followed up in that way. For her to independently follow up with them because they did send in letters, and again, she has some things scheduled. I believe she has already talked to some of those people. That's ongoing. We don't know exactly how long that's going to take. So we have enough to sort of give that status update, fill you in on where we're at with that, and also answer some of the specific questions that came up during the March 23rd meeting, because after talking with Tracy and sort of going through the first part of this process, we as the board of directors now have a little bit more clarity on what sorts of things around all of this it is appropriate for us to say publicly, and what sorts of things it would be inappropriate for us to say publicly, which I'm going to do. But like I said, the main point here is that this is the first of what will be multiple status updates. This may be something that we're able to, sort of fill people in more on about where we're at Spring MagCon. Depending on how long it takes, there would probably be another meeting, sort of either before or after Spring MagCon, similar to this one. Kind of a BoD presented fireside chat style thing that would come before our next, sort of quarterly fireside chat. In that vein, we've already scheduled our next one, so that's going to be July 11th. So we'll have another thing like this. Hopefully it'll be, sort of less on, sort of one specific contentious issue and a little bit more general. I really want to be spending a lot of time going into what the different BoD subcommittees are going into, what's happening in their agendas, what sorts of things we are actively soliciting and looking for feedback on, what discussions are coming up that people will probably care about. Again, encouraging people to follow those running agendas, sign up to be guests at those meetings, and so on. But we probably don't want to wait another 3 months before we give another status update on something like this. So you can expect to hear from us again. I would certainly say that we would have another status update of some sort within the next month or so. I would expect we will at least have that scheduled. I would think by the time that Spring MagCon rolls around. And so that gets into, like I said, on the March 23rd meeting, then, a lot of people had a lot of questions. And because of the nature of what's been going on, there are a lot of things that we can't get into. We are not going to open up any particular person's HR files. Either current employees, former employees, like anything like that. That's pretty much just off the table, and I think like most people understand that. But people definitely raised a lot of concerns that really do need to be addressed, like really do need to be answered. And so what I really want to do here is I want to talk about, in general, what is the process that the MAGFest Incorporated office goes through for terminating employees? Like, what do we do when we have to fire someone? Then I want to talk about how that relates to some of the things that were specifically alleged in the letters that were sent in, and I want to answer some of the questions, particular surrounding all of this that were brought up at the March 23rd meeting, particularly involving the timing of it, and then I want to, sort of go into like how that all went on Slack and what the board of directors' position on all of this is. So again, without talking in particular about any employee, past, present, or future, we really do want to emphasize that we do not want to, and we never would, fire anyone, for no reason. Someone being fired is an incredibly painful thing for everyone involved. It is obviously very painful for the person. It is painful for the organization. It is something that you don't want to do without having very good reason, and without having like a very good and extensive process around it. So if we are having problems with an employee, then what we want to do is we want to do everything we can to set up that employee for success, and help them overcome whatever job related problems they are having that are leading us down this road. And so that means that there will be a process over time in which problems are communicated to the employee. The employee is definitely going to be given some sort of chance to show improvement. This is assuming that there's nothing crazy extreme, if you murder someone, but yeah, I mean, but there is definitely going to be overtime, and historically, this has been, when this has happened, something that happens over a period of months. And this is going to be something that, although the executive director of MAGFest, ultimately has the final responsibility and is authorized to be the one to make the decision about this, this is something where a lot of people should generally be consulted. Historically, the entire board of directors has always been consulted anytime something like this has happened, as well as other MAGFest volunteers in particular, and often employees. Either coworkers of the person, or people in event leadership positions, or people on a relevant BoD subcommittee that kind of pertains to that employee's area of responsibility. And like I said, this is the kind of thing that would happen, typically, over a period of months. Obviously, specific cases, may differ. But there would need to, but we would want there to be over time, multiple different meetings with the employees, as well as check-ins about what is going on. And this is an area, where we sort of get to a lot of what was specifically alleged in the letters that were sent in. And there are three things that I really want to respond to, where I really do feel like we need to kind of correct the record. Like it was said in some of those letters, as well as on Slack, that employees of MAGFest Incorporated are fired just purely basically at the whim of the executive director. That this is a process that happens with no oversight or consultation, either from above or below, and that this is something where there are no resources, sort of made available, to employees, who are going through issues, and again, although it is obviously very challenging to talk about this because it involves private HR details that we can't go into the details of, I can tell you for certain that like none of that is the case. This is something where Nick goes way out of his way to consult with a lot of different people, a lot of different stakeholders over a very long period of time. This is something where the entire board of directors is looped in and informed, consulted about, basically every aspect of what is happening. MAGFest Incorporated is, kind of in a weird spot. Like, we are in some ways a very large organization with, like tens of thousands of attendees and, like thousands of volunteers. In other ways, we are a very small organization. We do not have a lot of paid staff. And so this is something where we are very much a small organization when it comes to the extent to which the leadership, particularly the board of directors and other, kind of BoD subcommittees and event leaders and what have you, are looped in when this kind of thing happens. And that is just something that I want to kind of keep saying over and over again, because, I continue to see it alleged that there is this problem in the MAGFest office, that kind of surrounds HR issues, that is, people get fired basically if Nick doesn't like them. And again, I can tell you for certain that like nothing could be further from the truth. That is not how that happens. There is a process that surrounds all of this. It is basically, I believe the kind of process that, any of us would want to have if we were in, that position ourselves. And again, I think that, we saw it being, some people had some questions, surrounding all of this, I think in particular because of the timing of this. And this was something that came up at the March 23rd meeting. We had more than one person who sort of said, well, hey, this happened, like right before Super. And I think that was seen as some people as evidence that this must have been a very, sort of like sudden decision. Which again, without going into the specifics of, what was weighed, unfortunately that decision was not sudden. That decision, was not made in a vacuum. That was made in consultation with the entire board of directors, and there just is not a good time for doing this. And again, this was extensively discussed, at length. The reasons for doing it now, for doing it, when we did it. And if there's just, one place where I really want to correct the record more than, anywhere else, it is in, sort of specifically noting that, while it is ultimately Nick in his role as executive director who, kind of has final authority and gets to make the final call on these things, he is extremely good about, roping in other people, consulting extensively with various other people and reaching out whenever a difficult decision like this has to be made. And so, obviously that is something that it can be difficult to convey, on Slack, or even through email, and, particularly in textual mediums. And, when all of this happened, I think, we found it very, and when the letters were sent in particular, I think one thing that we in the leadership, sort of found ourselves challenged by was, Slack is really not a good place to be discussing, HR issues. It is in particular not a place where, in general, we should be discussing, issues that people have with any particular MAGFest employee or volunteer. I mean, stepping back a minute from the specifics of this situation, if a bunch of people had gone into Slack to sort of have just very lengthy discussions about some, random department head at Super, that's something we would have just like shut down in a hurry, because, we would have said, hey guys, this is inappropriate. You can, talk to their division head. You can, kind of go through proper channels for all of this. But, obviously we felt in this case that, sort of trying to shut down that kind of discussion, even if people were sort of describing things in a way that, that weren't really accurate, and that it would take us a while to kind of get our bearings straight and kind of correct the record on, it was still important that we let that discussion happen, because in particular the nature of the allegations was basically that proper channels don't exist, or proper channels are not being followed. And that is the kind of accusation that we need to take very seriously. Even if, as I've been trying to lay out, like even if that's not the case, we want to make sure that like for the people seeing this, that like that they understand that no, we do take these things seriously. Like we are very actively involved when this kinds of things when these kind of things happen. We do take the advice of our general counsel and HR specialist very seriously. We do take complaints that people send into the board of directors very seriously, and we spend a lot of time like talking about them and building up process around them. And and the fact of the matter is that through all of this, obviously there are different sides to every story, but even after reading the things that have come in and having these discussions, we as the board of directors continue to be comfortable with the decisions that were made, and we continue to have just an enormous amount of support for Nick Marinelli in his role of executive director. Now, like I said, there's obviously there's an HR process that kind of is continuing. We've been very impressed with Tracy, who we hired this year, especially to handle things like this, and we are going to give quite a lot of deference to the sorts of like recommendations she provides. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that anyone has made up their mind, about what we're going to do, about just like anything else that comes in, or anything that results from that process. It would really just defeat the whole purpose of having this kind of process if we just decided in advance what we were going to do. But, again, like as of right now and having reviewed everything, I really do want to emphasize that, substantively, the complaints that were made about the way that, MAGFest Incorporated handles firings, are just broadly not the case. The way that the lack of process was described does not reflect the reality. And so this is probably, I'm guessing I'm going to have a few more questions or things that people want me to respond to here than I did a minute ago. Okay, here we go. Excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these in chronological order. So it looks like I've got about half a dozen here. I got a question right off the bat about for office partitioning and additional roles. What budget do we realistically have to hire people? Or will that partitioning be volunteer based? That is a fantastic question. The MAGFest Finance Task Force had a 5-hour meeting this past Saturday in which we reviewed the fiscal year 2019 budget. Not everyone was able to make it, I think, either at all or for the whole thing, but we sort of had a lot of really good work. We do believe that we have it in our budget to to sort of hire at least a couple more sort of director level positions. And I think like the high level number for people who, kind of care about these things is that, MAGFest at this point is approximately like a $2 million a year organization. That's what our, sort of like income and, and budget like roughly is. And of that, we spend about a quarter on payroll, or we were projected to spend, approximately a quarter of that, on payroll. Where by payroll, I mean both full-time office employees, part-time office employees, and then third-party contractors. Third-party contractors specifically for MAGFest Incorporated. We also hire various third-party contractors that are event-specific. So if we hire an AV contractor, then that doesn't get tracked as part of our payroll budget. It's kind of a boring distinction, but come to the MAGFest Finance Task Force, and we will definitely see. And you can definitely kind of dive into the nitty-gritty stuff on this. So someone asked, what is a volunteer board member? How is that different than the other board members? To clarify, and actually I would appreciate some help on the language for this, because we've actually spent a lot of time trying to sort of say, okay, so what do you call it when someone is a board member who doesn't get paid as opposed to a full-time board member? Now there is actually, the IRS has a distinction, which is an independent board member, which is a board member that is paid less than $10,000 per year by the organization. Currently, we have 6 members of the board of directors, one of whom is Nick Marinelli, the executive director of MAGFest, who is a director ex officio. He is paid a full-time salary, and then we have 5 volunteer members who are not paid anything. We are not paid to be board members, and we are not paid by the organization in any other capacity at the moment. That wasn't always the case. There was a period of time in which both Dawn and Nick were on the board of directors, and they were both being, employed by the MAGFest office. So yeah, if anyone has an idea for like what to call that's a little bit clearer. I mean, because in the context of something like, oh, here's a mailing list if you want to like, raise concerns about the MAGFest office and therefore have it go only to the board of directors members who are not part of the MAGFest office, as well as our like HR and general counsel person. I don't know of a better way to say that than just like volunteer BoD member. So yeah, like suggestions welcome on names. Let's see. So someone says, what is the typical wait time for a request to sit in on a BoD meeting? So that's a good question. So about 2 years ago, we started really aggressively, sort of like making sure that there was a guest at basically every BoD meeting. I'll asterisk that a little bit because like occasionally we might have like an impromptu called meeting to talk about like, again, a particular HR issue. And we would typically not have a like volunteer guest at those. But we had a lot of board meetings in a row with guests. And so there is a form for that. Hopefully someone else can dig that up since I'm like, trying to handle this and I do not have multiple screens on my laptop. But for the board of directors itself, the wait time used to be like pretty long. I mean, it literally, there were people who filled out the form and then it took like more than a year for us to get to them because even though we were having, in many cases like 2 or 3 board meetings a month for a while, this was particularly true back in 2016 and then, 2017 and then even around the beginning of 2018, then there were just so many people who were interested. That is down to a much shorter number. The last time I checked, I think there's only like 3 people on the core BoD volunteer list who have, who have expressed an interest. So I would expect the wait to not necessarily be that long. The finance task force, perhaps not surprisingly, has an extremely short / non-existent list of people who are lining up to talk about budgets and things. And while it is true that we spend a fair amount of time kind of poring over spreadsheets, and that might not be everyone's cup of tea, I actually think that like a lot of you guys would care quite a lot about like kind of the substance of what we're discussing. I mean, that is the group that is really kind of going over the numbers and being like, okay, what does it mean for like MAGWest to be successful? Like at what point should we like be pursuing like other events and and things like that. I mean, that is the kind of thing that I think quite a lot of us like really care about, even if you're not like a spreadsheet nerd. And then the advisory task force, is meeting at least once a month. Last time I checked, I think there's only, again, like 2 or 3 names on that we haven't gotten to. So altogether, this is my extremely long-winded way of saying, the wait time is probably, like, at this point, not much longer than a couple of months. Let's see here. So someone said, can you name a single instance where the executive director has sought a termination and the BoD has not approved it? So that is a really good question because I do think that, when we talk about all of this, as a BoD member, I sometimes see, people characterize things as like, oh, sure, there's a review process, but isn't the board of directors just kind of rubber stamping whatever the MAGFest office wants to do? And I think that, and that's really not the case. And in particular, the way that this is phrased, I think, makes it sound like, and I can see why people would think this way, that the way that this works is that Nick would come to the board of directors and then say, okay, I want to fire someone, I'm starting the process for that. But that is fundamentally not how that works. What is the case, what will happen is Nick will come to the board of directors and say, I am having an issue with this employee, and I would like your advice on how to handle this. And there are a lot of different ways that we can go with that, because nobody starts off, sort of the process of having, an issue with an employee, wanting, to fire someone. I mean, like I said, that is very painful. The organization loses a lot. The person obviously loses a lot, and so it is definitely the case that, the executive director has come to us, for advice about employees, either, like both ones that, are in the past who don't work here anymore, as well as ones who still do, and that we have helped kind of shape a process that has like set employees up for success, such that like people who have had problems have ultimately not been fired. And let's see. Will the board be willing to share aggregate information about complaints filed and processed? Obviously, details cannot be shared, but anything to give an indication that things entered in the process don't go into a black hole. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would think so. I am going to, yeah, you know what? I'm going to make sure to ask Tracy about this. I don't think that there would be any reason why we couldn't do that. I mean, again, even just like at each of these BoD, sort of meetings, like fireside chats, like I would expect that we could say like, oh, here's the number of these, sort of like, forms being filled out, or like emails that have been equivalent emails that have been sent to like BoD volunteers at magfest.org, or even just like emails that the BoD, and also in addition to that, even just like how many emails is like BoD at magfest.org getting. It's a lot less than you probably think. Yeah, I think that's a good question and a good idea. I think we should do it, and I will follow up with Tracy about all of that. Let's see here. So let's see. In the last fireside chat, Nick said that both he and Deb were going to be stepping away from their roles to find roles that better suit them. And then I think this person seems to feel like, that this... Okay, so well, let me first clarify that statement. And this is what I was sort of getting at earlier, which is that right now, like the job of executive director, it sort of became very painfully clear in 2018 that, this job as it currently was just involved too much. There were too many people directly reporting to one person. There were too many job responsibilities. We needed to kind of split it up. We started talking about this at a very high level, sort of like around the end of 2018, and then we really began in earnest, sort of like, here in in 2019, and the board of directors has sort of on an ongoing basis been going back and forth with the office about what that's going to look like, and so it is, like I said, nothing is set in stone, but it is very clear about the, sorry, let me rephrase. Nothing is set in stone about the specifics of what job positions we are going to end up with, but what is definitely the case is that the types of jobs that exist in the MAGFest office is going to be changing, specifically at the director level. We are definitely going to be adding more director level positions. The current plan is Nick is going to end up with one of those, Deborah is going to end up with one of those, and so, that's basically like what, Nick was talking about when he talked about him and Deb stepping away from their roles to find positions that, that better suit them. And, again, it's not, I should emphasize that this is not about like finding roles that best suit the people that we have. This is about figuring out what roles best suit the organization, and then figuring out what, within the, again, like figuring out which of those roles, once we've determined what roles best suit the organization, which of those roles the people that we have, are right for or not right for. What's the process for someone who feels they have relevant experience and wants to join one of the BoD task forces? Great question. So we have some application forms. Oh man, so there is an application form for joining the finance task force. There's an application form for joining the futures task force. And you know what? I don't believe that there is an application form for the advisory task force, but I should probably talk with them about making one. So yeah, I will be sure to share all of those links, kind of after this. And even if you don't do the task force thing, then even if you don't end up joining one of the task forces, definitely sit in on a volunteer. Keep track of our running agenda. This is, we try to go into Slack and then actively solicit feedback in, kind of relevant channels whenever we know there's a big discussion we're going to have, which actually segues into the next question, which is, do you not feel that more than a year wait to sit on a BoD meeting is an issue, especially when there is something that, especially when this has been promoted as a way to bring issues to the BoD? Right, so, I mean, it's definitely the case that, there has been a really long wait to get in on BoD meetings. However, that's just one way that, that you can sort of like give feedback and get involved. So like one of the things that we do is we maintain a running agenda of like everything that we sort of talk about at our meetings. Basically everything that's not like kind of HR issues about specific people. And so like if you want to, go back and look at like everything that we talked about in 2018, that's there. And we say which things are coming up and which things we've already discussed, and so in that way, people can kind of keep up with what we're doing, and then people can and absolutely do say like send an emails to us that say, hey, I saw that you're going to be talking about like security practices. Like I have thoughts about that. I see you're thinking about like hiring more EMTs or like hiring Prince George's County police officers to like be on site during the event to like improve our response times. I have feelings about that. Again, like things of that nature, and then for things that we expect are going to, sort of have particularly strong feelings, then, we'll actually go above and beyond just putting them on the running agenda. We will actually, sort of like, sometimes do a separate write-up apart from our agenda and then go into Slack and say something like, oh, hey, we're going to be talking about whether or not the elected BoD person should have a 1-year term or a 2-year term. And here's our write-up of the pros and cons. We haven't actually talked about this yet, so not only have we not made a decision, we haven't even really had the discussion, but here's what's at stake. So, anyone that like wants to like send us an email or hit us up on Slack or, give us a call or just like, whatever works for you, then like that's, the way that we can sort of like, hear from people and then get the volunteers involved, like, again, like more involved in the decision-making process. Again, so like you don't have to like wait a year or even if the time, gets down to only a couple of months. I mean, a couple of months is still kind of a lot. And so we really are trying to, so we really are trying to, just sort of get more volunteers involved in as many ways as possible, which is what the like task forces are about. So then I guess which segues into the next thing that someone asked, which is why doesn't the advisory board have any power? What stops the board from just ignoring their advice? So good question. So like right now, like currently, like all of the subcommittees that we've created are, advisory in nature, right? Like the finance task force is not able to set the salary of the executive director, for example. The finance task force makes recommendations about the salary of the executive director. It is in their charter. I mean, in theory, the board of directors could, can accept that or disregard it. And the main reason why we set things up that way was basically because this was all new. And this was something that we could do with a very minimal change to our bylaws. So far, I mean, I can say that there is no recommendation that any of these groups have ever made that has been ignored. Like 100% of the time so far, like we have just, sort of like accepted and gone with the recommendations that have been made. And so, so on that note, I think like the logical question is, let's say that continues to be the case, then, will it make more sense in the future to sort of like change our bylaws and then actually start saying, oh, okay, well maybe, the finance task force should be able to be actually authorized to, like to take some of these actions. Maybe the advisory task force, should be authorized to be able to take a vote to do X, Y, or Z. Like maybe like the BoD elections should become officially managed by, the election committee and the advisory task force in a way that is specified in our bylaws and not just, sort of in this like ad hoc way that we've been doing. I mean, I will say this is something where I'm just speaking for myself here. I'm very supportive of moving in that direction, but I am also, by my own nature, much more of an incrementalist. Like I tend to, want to say like, okay, let's take a small step in this direction, see how it works, and then keep going, and then if it works out, great, we'll do more of it. And that's basically the approach that we've been taking with these, sort of like task forces. And so I think we want to keep making more of them. We want them to keep growing, and I personally would like to see them, sort of get more, actual, like, sort of power. That's going to involve, that's going to involve both changes to our bylaws, some changes to our insurance. Like the people who are on these task forces currently don't have to like sign anything, either in terms of like, NDAs or like statements of fiduciary responsibility or, or whatever. I mean, so like we'll have to like sort all of that out. But again, like that's very doable. Let's see. Can we have a time slot during MagCon for staff and volunteers to talk about organizing, like as been mentioned in previous discussions? Ideally, that would be something that led not by MAG leadership. yeah, I mean, everyone's going to be at Spring Mag. I mean, I think honestly, from my optic, one of the things that Spring MagCon is really about um, is like just volunteers getting together and putting their heads together and doing stuff. So I mean, I'm sure that will happen. I'm not in charge of the time slots, but I think. I mean, I'm sure that there will be time that we have space available, and that that there's nothing happening, whether it's like officially on the schedule or not. Um, and then let's see, and then looks like there's only one more question here. Boy, we've got. Let's see here. Yeah, so we've got a lot of comments submitted by a relatively few number of people. But yeah, that's good. That's why we're doing this. It's back and forth. Yeah, and I guess finally, last comment seems to be that one person is saying that they feel that you know that just some people have no faith in the BoD. And is specifically saying that emails to the BoD email can receive no response. Which actually I can tell you is not the case. I mean, we are very good about like responding to emails sent to like BoD@magfest.org. I'm actually, I would really like to hear about it if anyone has had problems like sending emails there and then like not getting a response. And then this person also expresses like frustration that requests to sit down in a meeting take so long that it feels like people are being ignored, and that in meetings like this there are just details that we're not able to share. I understand that frustration. I think it is. I have been on the other side of that, at various day jobs that I have worked, sort of wanting to know why certain decisions were made, and knowing that like the leadership of the company is not able to go into detail about it. That can be very frustrating, particularly when you know some of the people involved, and it looks from your optic like what happened must have been a mistake, and can you please know more so that you can see for yourself that it's not a mistake. But I mean, just it is definitely a sorry, I just got a direct message from the person who sent that. Okay, so Deist is saying, so yeah, I mean, so again, if I absolutely apologize if you've sent emails to BoD@magfest.org and not got responses in the past. I am totally not aware of that. But I guess I would say that please like forward. Again, like anything that you've sent that you haven't gotten a response to, please like re-forward it to BoD@magfest.org. I will be particularly keeping an eye out for that, since you have told me about that. But I mean, I will say that I did a quick search like a week or two ago of like all of the emails that kind of people have sent to BoD@magfest.org in the last like couple of months. Basically, like, hey, since Super, how often has someone specifically like emailed BoD@magfest.org, asking a question about the kinds of stuff that we're talking about here? And the answer is, boy, not a lot. It really is only like 3 or 4 times. Now, there's a lot more cases where we get like CC, BoD@magfest.org gets like CC'd on an email that's sent to like multiple mailing lists. Also, like a lot of us are on the like all lists, so like I get everything across all of MagFest sent to my inbox. Thank God for Gmail filters, because if I didn't have it marking BoD emails as important and like floating them to the top of my inbox, like I think I would miss a lot more. But yeah, I mean, forward those emails, and I will make sure that they get responded to, like along with an apology for not having responded to them before now, if there is really stuff that we've missed. Okay, so I will set aside some more time for questions. That's through the questions that we've asked right now. I will set aside some more time for questions, and also we're going to have the Google Meet later. But so yeah, just a little bit of house cleaning before we kind of conclude the meeting. Like I said, Spring MagCon is coming up. I've been promoting that pretty heavily. That is May the 4th this year. Notably, that is at National Harbor, but not at the Gaylord. That is at the Westin across the street. Boy, the Gaylord fills up fast and in advance. And thankfully, we just renegotiated our contract with them. thanks to some like very incredible work by MAGFest employees, volunteers, and contractors. And like one of the things that we got the ability to do was book MagCon dates like years in advance so that this won't happen. But for right now, this is going to be at the Westin, so like across the street from National Harbor. But May the 4th, the BoD is going to be there, like by and large. I think there's going to be some presentations that are given by BoD members. We're still, figuring some of that stuff out. I've been working with the committee, like BoD subcommittees, to figure out what like the subcommittees are presenting, and in general, that'll be a really good chance to kind of meet and sort of get to know like the committee members that you might not know, and like the BoD members that that you might not get a chance to talk to in person all that much. Also, anyone that can't make it in person, we stream most of the stuff that happens at MagsCon, and so which is the correct plural of MagCon, by the way. And I think like in particular, one of the things that I like doing the most is just trying to have as much time set aside as possible to just like catch up with people, like talk with people one-on-one, have the sorts of conversations that we're having now, but like in a more sort of one-on-one setting where it's like easier to kind of go back and forth and respond to specific things. Also, please, I don't know why, but I posted the link to this in chat at the very beginning of all of this, but the staff satisfaction survey last year had way more responses than what we've gotten so far, and this is something that we really take very seriously. If anyone wants to, I can dig up, if anyone cares to see it, my like 15-page write-up of just the like BoD and kind of leadership related responses like from last year, where we kind of pulled out actionable things, and like the advisory task force is like really all in on sort of looking at this and mining it for like kind of actionable suggestions, and also just using it to kind of like take the temperature like of the organization. And so this is something where like this is just one way out of many to kind of have your voice be heard, and just like let us know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on your department, on your division, on the event as a whole, on the leadership, on just like, is it fun to work MAGFest? How what do you enjoy? What frustrates you? So yeah, please fill that out, and we will absolutely be sort of talking about that kind of at and going into Spring MagCon. And so let me go ahead and paste this link. Well, actually, sorry, I guess I'll take a few more. I'll just see if anyone else has submitted any more questions. But, oh yeah, it doesn't look like it. So actually, this would be probably a good time for us to kind of transition from, doing this as a stream for me, and, where I'm just doing all the talking, to talking with the rest of all of you. So let me, because you can't actually click that link that's here, then I am going to post that in the chat, and then I will sign off and go talk to all of you guys in person, or not in person, but let's see here. Whoa, hooray, someone beat me to it. Great, and with that, I am logging off of this. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll talk to y'all in just a minute.